Our top story tonight is a developing global scandal that may have been triggered by an interview we had with a Brazilian congressman on this very program. He also happens to be the son of the former and possibly future president of that country. Brazil is a massive economy in our near abroad, and we've watched closely as Brazil's free speech dynamic has been repeatedly attacked. It seems a rogue judiciary is not an exclusively uniquely American experience. One judge in Brazil is now petitioning the Attorney General to revoke the passport of Brazilian Congressman Eduardo Bolsonaro. Eduardo is the son of Jair Bolsonaro, the former president, who's currently leading in the polls to retake power. If he's even allowed to run under the crazy system they have down there where they charge their political enemies with crimes, where have we heard that before? Eduardo Bolsonaro joined me exclusively to detail the eroding democratic conditions in Brazil.
The lawfare that we're facing down there in Brazil is the same lawfare that Trump faced here. I usually say it's the same virus. The difference is that we have less antibodies in Brazil, which make things harder. In Brazil, you have the Superior Electoral Court, and they decide who can run, who cannot run. So my father, right after he stepped out from the presidency, this court said that he cannot run. Because two things. Because he met 40 ambassadors and did a live stream. It was actually a press conference too. And he was criticizing the electoral process in Brazil, something that he was doing for the last, 15 years.
So wait a second, if you criticize the way they run elections, they don't let you participate in the elections?
Yes.
That's crazy.
But if you had this kind of law here in the US, it wasn't only a mugshot in Georgia that Trump would take. Trump would be out of the ballots. I think that is really unfair. You do not let him run because he met ambassadors and criticized the electoral process. And the other excuse that they created is because he made a public statement after September 7th, because it's our Independence Day. So we had a military parade, and after that he crossed the street, going to a square where we have, almost 1 million people waiting for him. He did a speech. And the court, electoral court, said this was political abuse. Come on. And we cannot expect a fair judgment because all of the justices that are going to judge my father, they are appointed by left-wing presidents, Lula and Dilma, plus Alexandre de Moraes, which is a personal enemy of Jair Bolsonaro.
Following this interview, the very judge Eduardo was criticizing took the very sharp, unusual step of seeking to restrict his travel outside the country. So was it our in-person interview in our D.C. bureau that triggered this action? Was it Eduardo's participation in CPAC, a conference that brings together global conservative activists and leaders? To us, the fact that there would be an effort to try to constrain Eduardo Bolsonaro's travel only reinforces our concern that Brazil is headed in the wrong direction. So we wanted to zoom out and reflect on what happens if Brazil continues to backslide and how the United States can play a productive role in reversing these troubling trends. Joining us now is Brazilian journalist Paulo Figueiredo. Paulo, thanks for being here. Are people in Brazil today concerned about eroding democracy and authoritarianism under President Lula?
Well, let me answer the question in numbers. A poll by an institute, Paraná Pesquisas, last year said that 61% of Brazilians are afraid of expressing their views on social media. 61%. So that's the state of the country. And right now, although President Bolsonaro is leading all the polls for 2026, when the next presidential election is due, I think most people think he won't be able to run against the socialist Lula da Silva, who is the sitting president.
Yeah, that's not a democracy. Then what do you think drives that fear among such a large percentage of Brazilians that merely expressing a perspective online could result in harm?
Well, the fact that we had thousands of Brazilians already in prison or prosecuted somehow by the Justice Alexandre de Moraes, who is the de facto dictator of Brazil. Among these people are regular citizens, including 70-year-old women and 75-year-old men, but also journalists like myself and others that are under exile. And right now we're under the possibility that even the son of former President Bolsonaro, Congressman Eduardo Bolsonaro, that has been on your show, is in the possibility of staying in the United States in exile as well. So we have a congressman in prison, who have senators silenced. We have regular people prosecuted. You're not safe if you're in Brazil and you're against the socialist regime that is in place right now.
It does seem that way, and we've been following closely what happened to Eduardo and this threat about his travel being restricted by the current government there. Is that just driven by the Bolsonaro name having a lot of popularity in this moment in time, or is there any credible allegation against Eduardo Bolsonaro at all?
Well, the allegation is that he is betraying the country, trying to explain in the United States what's happening in Brazil. So they claim he has a role on this offensive that the Trump administration is starting, in a timid manner, to play against the socialist regime in Brazil and against Justice Moraes. So what they're saying is that Bolsonaro is spreading disinformation against his own country in the United States and coordinating an attack against our institutions. Therefore, he's betraying the country and we should seize his passport.
Do you think that Eduardo Bolsonaro may be in some jeopardy of arrest or phony charges like we've seen against his father?
Oh, he definitely is. He definitely is. What I'm saying is not hearsay. There's a decision waiting on the desk of the same Justice Moraes, that guy that looks like a James Bond villain that had a feud with Elon Musk. It's the same justice that is going to trial former President Bolsonaro and myself. I'm also in the same indictment. And Eduardo Bolsonaro, he has a petition on his desk to evaluate if he's going to seize Eduardo Bolsonaro's passport or not.
You mentioned that you don't even believe Jair Bolsonaro will be allowed to run in the next presidential election. Eduardo expressed a different perspective on our show, believing that there would be a vindication through a legislative vehicle. What informs your belief that there really will be no opportunity for the voters of Brazil to make a democratic choice on these two different visions of leadership?
Well, what I said is that most people in Brazil don't believe he'll be able to run. I'm more optimistic, just as Eduardo. I think there's not only the legislative procedure that might give Bolsonaro the possibility to run again, but also I believe there's an important role that the United States foreign policy will play in pressuring the Brazilian government to reestablish the full democracy and free elections in the country. And in this situation, former President Bolsonaro would be able to run again. And if he's able to run again, he will win.
We had Eduardo Bolsonaro make a direct appeal to the Trump administration to send Vice President J.D. Vance to Brazil to call out these departures from the norms that we would like to think about in a free society where people can share their views and run for office. How do you believe the United States government should handle these declining democratic conditions right here and or near abroad?
Well, the United States should redirect its foreign policy. Well, first, because the situation that's happening in Brazil, the United States, the Biden administration had a big role on it, not only funding all disinformation campaigns in Brazil through USAID, but also sending its top officials in 2022 to make sure this same Justice Moraes was not challenged during his electoral process. They actually sent Lloyd Austin, Bill Burns, Victoria Nuland, and others directly to Brazil to put pressure on Brazilian public officials and military leaders to make sure Moraes was not challenged and so Lula could get elected. So that's, the United States had a role, an important role in the situation in Brazil. But also, Brazil is very important.
You say it's an important role, but that sounds like a corrupt role. And so I want to know if you think some of that is still ongoing. Do you believe that there are leftists in the United States who are still pulling the strings with Justice Moraes and animating some of these anti-democratic actions?
I think President Trump did a good thing stopping all USAID money that was funding the censorship industrial complex in Brazil. But right now, Brazil doesn't even have an ambassador yet. So all the people that are in charge of the Brazilian embassy are the same people that were in charge during the Biden administration. So I can't tell you for sure. What I can tell is that there's a lot to be done, and it's fairly easy. If Donald Trump wants, if President Trump wants, he can reestablish democracy in Brazil with just U.S. foreign policy, no intervention. Just the fact that he can sanction Justice Moraes with using the Magnitsky Act, and then he can impose financial sanctions, the OFAC sanctions against the justice. There's also other diplomatic measures that he can use. But so far, I'd say the Trump administration did not actually start their work in Brazil.
It seems like there's a lot of work that has to happen there. And you were about to tell me what happens if Brazil falls? What happens if Brazil becomes this authoritarian state beyond any quick fix? Do you think that will have spillover effects throughout the rest of Latin America?
So we're talking about the country other countries in Latin America follow. Brazil, it's half of South America in terms of territory, GDP, and population. Brazil is the dreamland for China because Brazil has everything China needs, from rare earth minerals. Brazil just sold last month the largest uranium reserve in the Amazon jungle to the Chinese. Brazil also has a lot of food, which the Chinese desperately need. Brazil has the second iron ore producer in the world, energy powerhouse that produces more oil than most OPEC countries. And who controls Brazil controls the South Atlantic Ocean. So from a geopolitical perspective, I'd say there are no other country in this continent that's more important than the United States than Brazil. The problem is it looks like the United States government is not completely aware of that. But the Chinese government is definitely aware. The Chinese are buying all the infrastructure in the country. It's becoming more and more common. If you have a company that operates in some strategic infrastructure sector, to have people that speak Mandarin as translators during the meetings. So, and this is happening fast.
Yeah,
so
no,
what's going to happen? Right,
what you just said is why I have highlighted this on the program tonight. You have a massive economy with a huge population of people and boundless natural resources. And this goes one of two ways. They come our way or they go toward China. And when you have a socialist government repressing speech, stopping association, threatening to jail political opponents, trying to jail a journalist, that ought to get the attention of the United States a lot more than the things that have happened oceans away that seem to get the obsession of U.S. policymakers. And so I think it's a really important point you make that we have to pay attention to what's happening in Brazil. It's right under our nose. It's critically important. And our loss here will be China's win. And once the Chinese move in, it becomes very difficult to untangle that. And it sounds like they're on the march right now. Paulo Figueiredo, before I let you go, where can folks continue to follow your reporting and your particular case?
My social media at Rio P. Figueiredo. I'm on every single one of them.
Thank you so much for being here to share your perspective, and we look forward to checking back in.